Hello, welcome to my channel. This should be the last video in our OAuth series. This is part 3, and it's probably the most important. So sit tight and enjoy. In the first video, we saw how we can connect multiple applications together without using OAuth. So we had an API, we had a web app. The web app was sending requests to the API for some content, and we did not use OAuth. The API was not protected. So the only protection in there was the use of CORS, which just ensures that we whitelisted the web app that was sending requests, but that's not real protection. Anyone can bypass CORS security layer. So there are ways to go about that. So, but what we want to do is, instead of just allowing the API to be open, we want to have OAuth set up in it. And that's what we are doing in this video. We have two applications, a web app and a web API. Previously, in our previous implementation of OAuth, before the last video, just the immediate last video, we've been seeing how we can use OAuth in to access resources on Azure, to like storage account, virtual machine, um, key vault, and things like that. But this time around, we are looking at independent applications. We are only using the OAuth feature of Microsoft Azure, the OAuth feature that can be utilized with application objects, with app registration into our applications. So we are not authorizing storage account as it were. That's not what this video is for. So I'll be sharing my screen. So this is the last video, as I said. So all the previous videos that we've been doing, they are all being summarized in this video. So if you've not been watching the previous videos and you are seeing this, then this is like the most important. So sit tight. So let me share my screen. As I said, we have two applications. So I'll be sharing my screen for the web app first. Then afterwards, I'll probably show you the web API as well. It's the same web API that I used in the last video. But this is the web app. This is the web app. What this app is doing is this app is connecting to the web API. So the web API is like, let's assume the web API is like a bank. So a bank are the owners of the API. Then this application, this web app are kind of like fintechs that are connecting to the web API. They are connecting to the bank. So this is the application. So I'll just show you some important part of this code because I don't want it to be too long. I'll make the codes available. All my codes will be available. They are all open source. So we are defining a scope. I'll come back to this scope, how we came about this scope. So these long numbers here is just a client ID that was generated from our application object. So I'll come back to this, but just take note that we are defining a scope here. And that's why we are not going to be using apples. We're not going to be using apples because we are defining our scope here. Then another thing I want to show you is where the request, the HTTP request is actually happening. And let me go to my controller. So you can see the scope is also being defined here. Then this is the interesting part. You can see the HTTP client. This URL is the URL that we use to access the API, the web API that we built. So I've hosted this on Azure. That's why we have this URL. This web app also, it has been published on Azure as well. So we've worked on something similar for this web app. So I think the core parts that we haven't done is the Azure part, the Microsoft Azure, the way you need to architect it. I think I would have even loved if I had drawn something up to make the architecture clear so that we can have a clearer understanding on what this is. Because me just explaining it, it can get confusing on what is connecting to what. But as I said earlier on, we have two applications. Then another major modification I did, which is something that we've done previously, is the login page. So I just added sign in and sign out. I deleted what was here by default and I added this. Then from the layout, this is the important line referencing that page over here. This line would make this to be there. Yeah, so then yeah, one key thing also that I also need to mention is that I use scaffolding here. So I did not just leave it to Microsoft. So what you need to do to add the scaffolding from Microsoft Identity, you right click, you go to, you right click on your project, you go to add a new item, then you click on identity, uh, identity, here's identity. Okay, no, you add the scaffolded item, rather. You add a scaffolded item. Where is that? Add new scaffolded item. Then you'll be able to click on identity. And when you click on add, you can now select login and log out pages. So what that does is that it lets you get it generates code for the log in and the log out for you. Yeah, so I think that's the core thing that I want to say here before we go to Azure, because Azure is where the main thing is happening. So I might reference some aspect of this code later on. So the home controller, okay, I've been here before. So let me just go to Azure and we'll continue from there. So I'm opening Azure now. Okay, so we are on Azure now. As I said earlier on in this video, so we need two application objects. You know, in the last video, we are working with Postman and the web API. We needed an application object for Postman. We needed another application object for the web API. In this video, we are not using Postman. The application is automatically generating the token and it's also sending it across to the API to validate. So we need two application objects also. And the way we treat this application object is different from how we treated the one for Postman. Yeah, so the first thing we need to do is, so I have an application object for the web app, which is what we have here. Your web app API underscore obj is the application object for the web app. I have another application object for the web API, which I will be searching for. Yeah, I think this is it. This is the one for the web app API. Okay, let me get the one for the web app. So the one for the web app, I called it OAuth. I called it OAuth something something. Yeah, so I'm opening my app registration now. So this is the one for the web app. This is the object for the web app. And this is the one for the API. Okay. So what we would do is the first thing that we have to have in place if you want to do this is the application object for the web API. You need to go over to it and add scope, which I think we already did. If I should go over to API permission, no, not API permission. Okay, I think basically this scope that we've added, you just need to copy it. So this is where I got that scope that was used in the code. So you just need to copy this. This is the scope. You need to copy it and slot it into your code, which we saw earlier on. So after doing that, you add it to your startup class as well as your controller, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Then you create another application object, which I already did, and you take note of the client ID and you generate a client secret as well. So in this case, you need to generate a client secret. Come over here, generate a client secret. We have a client secret here, and use the client ID from the overview as well. Then you copy both and slot it into your app setting, .json file. So the same, similar to how we have those when we are working with Postman. So the client ID and the client secret are important. So I'm just allowing us know the functional part of what we are doing, the functional part of what we need to do to get it to work. Then one core thing as well is that it's also important that in our controller, so I already mentioned this, that the scope needs to be in our controller, and also we use the HTTP client class to send an API request to the API. So this is for the web app. We are using HTTP client to send the request to the API. Then thirdly, from our views folder, I already spoke about our index.chtml and login partial, and now we need to manipulate it to get our login pages. Then you publish your web app to you publish it to Azure, which I already did. Then you also publish your API. That's if you are yet to do that as well. Then going to your API permission. So for our login, if you can recall, we did this in some of our previous videos, changing the redirect URI to ensure that, okay, that's under authentication, to ensure that we can log in and log out using OpenID Connect. You can see OpenID is what we are using here. OpenID is the standard that works with OAuth. So we use OpenID Connect over here, and we can see it in place here. Then another thing that we also need to do is, so this has to be published, and in our OpenID Connect, we use the URI and just append /sign-in -OpenID, and likewise do the same for our sign out. So one last thing that we need to do is in terms of our API permission. So for our API permission, because we are not using Postman here, it's what we need to add is of type delegated. So what we can do is we'll go over to API permission. Now take a look at this. So the Microsoft Graph user read, I believe it was there by default. So you need to add user impersonation for Azure. You need to add this. And this as well, cases.read. So how do you add this? You just click on add a permission. You go to my APIs, and when you select this time around, you will be able to make it dedicated because we are not using Postman. We didn't choose application, so this can be delegated. Yeah, so we add this, so it just needs to look like this. You can add admin consent as well. Yeah, so that's basically it. So I think we are good. I think we are good. That's all the key things that I worked on to get this to work. I've tested it and I'll be testing it again. Yeah, so if you can recall, when we went to in our last video, when we went to API permission over here and we wanted to add a permission, it was of type application. You can see it's type application here, type application. But over here, you can see it's type delegated. The same API, the same access, but of different type. Because Postman is we are using it directly, it's an application, but this is delegated because everything is being done in the background. Okay, so I think I can run my app. So this is the app. So let me run the app and hopefully it works as expected. So I'll go to the web app. So this is my app service. So as usual, you know, I have two. One is for the web API, one is for the web app. This is for the API, this is for the web app, this is for the API, this is for the web app. So I'm interested in the one for the web app because the API is running. There is the web app I'm interested in. So this is the web app. It's opening. So I'm copying the URI, open a new tab, then I slot it in and enter. Yeah, so it logs me in and you can see this is the content of our web API. So this application is connected to our web API, and you can see that the web API is feeding content to it in real time. So if I should make any little modification in the web API and I refresh this, you see that it will be reflected directly. And this is not just it's not happening without permission. So it's full OAuth. There's bearer authentication in between. There is validation of the token, and so many things are happening in the background that we have delegated to Microsoft to handle for us. So many things are happening in the background. If I should draw the architecture for you on all that is happening, you'll be amazed at how easy it looks from the outside. And this same process is what is in use in many organizations because there are many applications that are connected to um, different services across the world, and especially when the APIs are protected, not just free APIs. that you want to know who is having access, and maybe you probably want them to make some payment and you want to do some review before granting them access. This is something that will be highly useful. So this is the end of our OAuth series. This is the end of our OAuth series. We'll be going into some other interesting aspects of building solutions with Microsoft Azure. So if you find this useful, don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe. Have a nice day, everyone.